Father, I just thank you for this day that you've given to us. Thank you for the word and that you have given to us, and that you faithful men that have recorded it. Help us here today as we continue on just to get closer to being in Exodus, that we'll have a love for your word and just a love for you, Father, and just be at the services today. Help us to listen to your word and to hear it and to be obedient to it. And I just pray for those here today that be with them this coming week, and just the many different things that are beyond church and beyond together, the work that they have and just the things going on in their lives. I just pray for them. Again, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I'm going to try to go slow. Again, I don't know if anybody's going to come to the choir and everything. Won't be here. There won't be a class next week, and so we'll have a break for me and everything. We will. I promise you, we will get into Exodus then. And so, but I'll talk a little bit about. I went from talking about reading and being and studying the Old Testament. I've narrowed it down to the Pentateuch, and the Pentateuch just means 5 books. The naming of different things. The Jewish would be the Torah with a capital T. If it's a lowercase t, Torah means instructions. I think a lot of times, just for that fact that it says law, for us Americans, the first thing that pops into our head is the laws that are given to us by our government and everything that we have to obey. Torah means instructions, it means training, and so we have to kind of play with that. But the first 5 books, they're called the Torah or the Pentateuch, and I'll probably use the Pentateuch more often and everything. And so just want to go through and, some things we need to know about it, or you may know about it, you probably do, but just kind of rehearse it over. First of all, it's the first act in a grand story, and I put it up there, story, but I'm going to admit to you, I have a hard time with that word story, because a lot of times people equate it to something that's not real. Mythology, sit down with a grandson and read him about the little blue truck. It's a story, but it's not real and everything. So when it shows up here, I'm talking about a real thing. Some of my notes I'll put narrative and everything, but it is part of one big history thing and storyline that's been given to us. I really believe this. If you don't have a good grasp on the first 5 books, it's not gonna help you if you jump to the New Testament. And again, that's why I think again, I can't remember my growing up years that much, but I know I heard Old Testament sermons, but I just want to say that I think I heard more New Testament than I heard Old Testament. Sometimes if you do, as a kid, what did we hear from the Old Testament? Stories, but what stories?
David and Goliath.
Noah.
No, David and Goliath and
King David.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, yeah, and we just got them in these
Get those highlights.
little bits and pieces and everything, and so it helps us. And I put up there, give an increasing vision of the gospel, and I'm going to be very honest. A lot of times when I say gospel, I mean the whole book. Sometimes we just say gospel connects to the New Testament. No, it starts here, and it's the whole thing. And so the story starts here. It goes all the way to Revelation. That is just one book that I'm going to probably recommend or do something about it. What he's pointing out is that the interconnected completeness all the way through. You have to have all these things to get to the book of Revelation and everything. These first 5 books are foundational, and as I've said, there's some difficulty in them. Oh, I was going to say this before I even said, 10 Commandments was on last night on TV. Did not watch it, but I was starting to think later on today, I was thinking, it was almost a 4-hour movie. I didn't realize it was that long. They must have cut stuff, put on TV and everything. But I think every Passover, since Passover started, they do the 10 Commandments or something. But I know as a kid I saw it and everything and stuff. But it's interesting. That's his second try. He did it in 1923. He did a 2-hour movie, and then in 1956 he did this 4-hour movie and everything. So I find it so interesting because we left it on just at the beginning it was butchered in the very beginning. They left tons of stuff, and I
We're like,
laughed.
we're gonna watch this. No, we made it about 15 minutes and we had to turn it off.
This guy that I see where, because that's the other thing we noticed. What they did is they ran all the credits in the beginning, and they actually ran all the credits slowly. But this guy this Timothy Mahoney, I don't know if you'll watch some of his stuff from the Patterns of Evidence and everything, but he talks about Cecil B. DeMille, that he did thorough study. He did. I could tell through all the rabbis that were mentioned that he consulted with or read their materials and everything, and they obviously didn't know anything about Moses. It was just amazing in the beginning how they just butchered it. And key things that we'll talk about when we come back is just they're in the Bible for a reason, and the stuff that's left out is left out for a reason and everything. But Cecil B. DeMille, he had to put some other stuff in, and just anyways, I just couldn't believe it. 10 Commandments. I was like, can you believe that? So, but I just couldn't. Then we turned it back on after we were watching. Again, it's like, no, it wasn't the same Pharaoh. You people were running things around here and everything, but it's amazing. Okay, the Pentateuch is the book of Moses, and this is kind of obvious and everything, but I need to think about it and everything. And I've given verses up here and everything, and but as we saw with Luke, he talked about start with the law or start with Moses, and it's just that's how they all looked at it and everything. And this is the part that gets me, and stuff I'll probably mention later and everything. There's a ton of people out there that call. I'm trying to figure out how to talk about some of these guys. Are they theologians? Calling them a theologian, does that mean they're a Christian? Are they a Christian even if they don't believe the Bible? It's just very hard. And these people that write, so many of them do not believe Moses wrote these first 5 books. And I'll talk some more about, they don't even believe the Exodus took place. But yet they teach in the religion departments of these many, many universities. But they don't believe it. And and yet we have Jesus talking about Moses. We have all the way through the Old Testament. That's the other thing. If you read through the Bible, and like I said, I'm up to the First Kings. I don't know how many times about, and I brought you out of Egypt. I brought you, and Moses did this. I mean, it's mentioned all the way through. It's like, so this is not real. They faked this whole thing. They wrote this in 200 BC to give a history to Israel. I said, no, it's totally impossible. So again, an important thing, it's a book of Moses. And he's a very key, important person because you read through, you're just going to constantly see his name coming up. And he's a prophet. He's, according to Deuteronomy 34, he was the greatest prophet until actually John the Baptist and Jesus come. They're prophets, but they're not, they're all compared to him. And so, and it's always called a book, really. It's not books. Again, the idea of the separation of the books comes from that they could not make scrolls that big. And so it's 5 scrolls. And so that's once the Septuagint came out and it split them up. And from that point on, that's how we do it. There's nothing wrong with it because they do have, like, Genesis has its different storylines and kind of fits there. Exodus does, and so it's there, but it's all just one book, and it's even referenced that way as being a book that's there. Again, as I just said, it's divided up, but it's still the book of Moses. It means that it should be read together, and there again, I say that, and we just have a hard enough time trying to read Exodus, let alone all 5 of them and everything. And yet, they should be read together. My idea is by the time I drop over dead, which doesn't matter once I'm with the Lord, is that I've read through it so many times, at least I think I know how they're all interconnected and everything. Of course, as I get older, I forget everything. The Pentateuch is a book of redemption, and that's what Exodus is. We're going to run into that. It starts out with the Creator. God creates. He creates the world and everything. It gives us the fall into sin. It starts that whole idea from Genesis 3:15 on. We're looking for someone to correct the problem. We're thrown out of the garden. The garden plays, the picture of the garden really plays big through, really all the way through the Bible. I think sometimes we don't, I know I don't. My studies only have indicated many of the things that are trying to point to the garden. The garden was where they commune with God. And that's what's trying to come back to. And Exodus leads into that area of trying to get back to that point. But we'll see the failures and things of that. And to me, the end of Exodus has a lot to think about in chapter 40. There's just some things that are going on. It tells a story. It goes all the way to Revelation, and we get the story of God's rescue of rebels. I put that on there, and that rescue is redemption. The redemption is so important, and that's what's going on. And I think, I don't want to keep repeating stuff and everything. The first 5 books is the first act, and I think we need to know it. I'm going to repeat that again. And for us, 3,500 years later, we need to know that. I think that's one of my failings. I won't put you guys in there. One of my failings of not being able to stop and think about it. We're going to see the starting of telling, you need to tell this to your children. Get the Deuteronomy. He repeats it again to the second generation. He says, you need to tell it. We need to keep that in mind, what God has done. It's very important that we do that. The Pentateuch portrays creation as a theater of redemption. Because that's what it starts out with. Why does it start out with a creation account? We probably could answer that many different ways. For us, for me, I know where I came from. I know where everything came from. And so there is a beginning for you and me. In the Pentateuch, we encounter God. He calls the people to himself. We're going to see God in Genesis talking to, he calls out Abraham, and then it starts through that line. And then once we get to Exodus, we see these are my people. He'll say, I think it's in chapter 4, he says, my son. It's very important why he says, this is my son. He's talking about the people of Israel and everything. As the first readers encounter the beginning of Genesis, they would those, I would say a lot of them knew the creation stuff. But when you get to Exodus, and now they're going to be taken out of Egypt. That was a conversation we were having last night, just, why didn't they leave?
Before they got slaves.
Before they, it's just, I think that tells something about human beings. We get comfortable where they lived in a good area. The land of Goshen was good. My only thought, we have to wait till God calls a leader. And he didn't call anybody else. He told Jacob, yes, go down there. Told Abraham, well, I keep repeating stuff. Why didn't they leave and everything? But when those first readers, and that is a point. Every time you read the Bible and everything, think about the first readers, who they were, what their life was, where they're at. These first readers are Old Covenant people. And they're reading this, and as I put up there, it says, oh, God was the creator of this. Oh, that's the one that told Pharaoh to let my people go. And I pointed out to him that all your gods are worthless because he's the creator. He made all this, he controls all this, and so I think it's very important, to them they looked at it, but I wrote that and everything, I thought, no, we should be blown away too. That God says that my sins are completely gone if I believe in his Son that lived and died and is God and rose again, he will take care of it. It's the same thing as that I repeat 1,000 times in my mind and everything. Moses says to the people, stand still and watch what God does. Now, we're supposed to do stuff. We're supposed to move forward. James makes sure we need to be doers of the word and everything. But God is there, and he's the creator of the world. We need to stop and think, well, then if he's that faithful, we need to trust him. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Oh.
Has to be in writing.
Well, that's right, it has to be in writing and submitted. You talked about the first readers. When do you think Moses actually wrote the Pentateuch?
I told you 200 BC. No.
Wow.
It's a tough one.
I mean, because I was just wondering, who are the first readers? Because these people are living through it. I mean, here.
I think some of them are. Some of them are. Well, actually, if they were under 20 years old, they didn't die.
Yeah.
If they were 19, they didn't die.
I'm just saying,
So
when we're reading this, Moses is a baby, so he's not writing it yet, but I mean.
Well, he wrote it down. He probably wrote it. I hate using dates because everybody has a different date in their head. Some of them believe that he wrote it on the mountain.
Okay.
Because he was up.
40 days. Twice.
Yeah, he's twice.
Yeah.
I have, and I would make the notes out that he went up the mountain 8 times, 9 times. I mean, but he was up there 80 days total. Some believe during the 40 years of wandering.
40 years. 40 years.
They're 40 years in desert. So a lot of them, he wrote it during that time.
That God,
And I'm
a lot of it's
curious.
the law, the Deuteronomy and Leviticus.
And again, I don't want to speculate, and I made that comment to tell me if I'm going too fast, and I'm not going fast at all now.
He said first reader.
I'm curious, and I put in this mind, again, I'm a nobody, and so the things that I think, but I'm curious if, like, he wrote Genesis, and they all got together, maybe in groups and everything, and they read through it. Because some of them, I truly believe that they had writings and they could read. They were not illiterate. I hate the stuff every time I hear the theologians, the wise men make comments that they're illiterate. I disagree with that. I'm sorry. Yeah. God, what is the main thing? We're created in whose image? God's. And I seriously believe that Adam wrote the verbalization of a language came from God. It didn't come from us. We didn't create that. And I think writing was created by God. We're at the other end. We suffer because of the Tower of Babel. It just, and it's turned in. So I believe that possibly he wrote it, they read it, and went through and everything. I think copies started being made. Some were supposed to stay with the ark, and I think it went through, and then finally by Deuteronomy it was done. But they had the 40 years and everything, and they're writing by hand. Now I believe that Moses definitely knew how to write. This Timothy Mahoney, they go through the alphabet, who created the alphabet. I disagree with his viewpoint. I'm sorry, the alphabet that came with Noah and his family, they knew how to write it. Now, was Hebrew the original language? I'm not going to say that. That's just too dangerous to say and everything, but there was some kind of language. But I think they had right. But as Romans chapter 3, they're becoming a nation now. It was his people, but now this is the nation. It says that they were given the oracles of God. And so I think I just really believe that they knew that and they were reading that. And I just think, but by the end of the 40 years.
Yeah, well, I'd say it may have been earlier, but certainly the generation that Joshua led in to the promised land, Moses died, right? So it had to have been recorded by then.
Yeah.
And they could have been the first to read it, but certainly probably before that, like you're saying, but no later than that.
No later than that, yeah, I agree with that.
I didn't know if he did it on the mountain or in the 40 years or
Right,
before
And
that.
there's
or,
all kinds of speculations.
I just was curious.
What do you do in 40 days? You're in the presence of God. I'd probably die, but we're not, again, there's this thing that we're not told, you know? But there's a lot of things he's told. I mean, he has given the complete details of the tabernacle. It is, I'm going to repeat stuff.
Well, and God wrote the Ten Commandments on that tablet, right?
Yeah.
So it had to be in a form that they knew and could read.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's the part that gets me. He says, don't call these people illiterate. I don't know what that reads. That's what I would say today. I can't understand that. But I'm quite sure that they taught their children. I don't know. But then that leads to the question, why didn't you leave? You know?
I was actually just thinking about that. I mean, they were in Egypt for 400 years.
Yeah.
They weren't in slavery then.
No, that's what I was
They were valued. I mean, they were given the best area of Egypt to settle in, and they grew very quickly. It says that a pharaoh rose up that didn't know Joseph. Well, I mean, that could have been 350 years in, and there was only 2 generations that were enslaved.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible's not clear on that. And as a respected and honored portion of Egyptian culture, I mean, they would have been well educated.
Yeah. Well,
And Moses was treated as the son of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
So,
He was definitely educated.
But Joseph, just look what Joseph did. I just can't believe, this is our uncle, but we can't read anything. No, I think there was, and yes, they were in that land of Goshen and everything, and I truly believe, to me, anybody that says no, Israel never existed, I'm sorry, they were a group of people that they didn't get absorbed into Egypt for 400 years. They stayed who they were. And so, it makes you think of a lot of stuff and everything.
It was the foremost culture at that time.
Yeah.
That was where people went because they had food and
Exactly.
because they had knowledge.
Yeah, and it was, so some of the things that the movies, the TV, they just, and the Darwinian evolutionists, they just packed in, it was like Jane said, 1956, the 10 Commandments came out, 69 years of people watching total trash. Now, I saw it, but thankfully I was in a Christian home and that the Bible was more important than TV. but how many people would just fall into that? I mean, I still, in my latest readings, 21st century writings still fall into the stuff that they talked about then, and they still believe it. And I don't know. So it brings up a lot of stuff, and that's why I say the questions I ask. I have so many questions too after reading and thinking about that. God gave us enough here, and just like, He's the creator. We should be awed at that He's letting me stand here and talk like an idiot. Look at this. It's God's. Nothing's going to stop Him. And we're going to talk about the hardening of the heart. That's an interesting aspect of with Pharaoh and his heart. God's promises are sure. And to me, again, as the readers here, I ask the question, look for the things that tell us about God. This is one right here. God's promises that He's made, He keeps them. We've been made promises. We've been told Christ is coming back. It's going to happen. We don't know when, and it's not for me to predict. It's for me to stand and say, He's coming back, and do my work, which I'm very bad at. Number 5, the Pentateuch outlines the first covenants that Yahweh made with His people, and we're going to talk about, I'll put it up here, Yahweh. I'm going to talk some more about this later on, using Yahweh. The academic word for YHWH is a tetragrammaton, and I won't say it again because I'll mispronounce it after that, so I got it out and everything. I think it's very important. It's pronounced Yahweh, but like I said, I'm going to talk some more about it. There are many people, a lot of them are dead and gone, say it's Jehovah, but it's not. But you're going to see it a lot in my notes. I'm going to go with that. In the ESV, the NSAB, all the different versions, just about majority of them will put it in the capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. We'll read it as Lord, and I was telling Bart that that's my problem I have, is that it's a more important name of God, and we're going to talk about that when I hear Lord, Lord, then I'm not getting the emphasis that is supposed to be there. And the first readers saw Yahweh, and they said it too. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so we have the covenants that are, we find them in there. These covenants, they drive the story of redemption and everything. And the Pentateuch has 4 of the covenants. The first one's creation covenant, find that in Genesis. Told to multiply and to have dominion. Of course, we play games with the word dominion and everything. But we have a covenant given to Noah in chapter 6, chapter 9. We'll see that covenant that's given to him. Then we have the covenant that's given to Abraham. We'll talk about that. I only put chapter 15, but it's chapter 12, I think 13, 15, 17. It kind of builds through there as God adds and talks about that covenant. And then we have the covenant with Moses. That's what we're going to have on the mount. This is a covenant that's given to Moses, and I put Israel in there because it's with the people. And this is a covenant that's very important to understand. And then later on, he makes a covenant with David, and then we have in Jeremiah and Ezekiel the new covenant. And as I said, think about when you're reading the Old Testament, you're in the Old Covenants. When we're in the New Testament, we're into the New Covenant. And so it's kind of things that need. So the Pentateuch is important, so even just to know about the covenants. Try to understand that covenant with Abraham it's got tons of stuff in there. But what is it? People, land, and blessings. That's break it down just to make it simple and everything. But it's important to kind of understand what that covenant means, and the blessings ones, we're affected by that. it's true. We respect Israel and we try to work with Israel and everything, even though the Israeli people, they, most of them are secular. They don't even care about what the Bible says. But still, we recognize that that's why I say, where are the Hittites? Where are the Jebusites? They're all gone. They may say that someday about the Americans. Where are they? You know, but the Israel, look, they're still there and everything. And so it's very important that, you know, we know that. Number 6, the Pentateuch records the greatest act of redemption. That's what we're going to start, and you're wishing that Dan would get into the book of Exodus because that's why I advertise with Exodus. It records that. When God takes these people, but it's big. What's being done here is big. And again, here we are 3,500 years later. Israel is there, they're struggling, they're fighting. Egypt is just there. It's not even it's a nation that's involved in stuff, but it's not a world power or anything. But Egypt still exists. And they go to the end too. But what God did here is we need to try to at least understand what's going on because it takes us into the New Testament. Prophets are going to be talking about a second Exodus, and that's why I think I'll have it up here. Jesus is the one that brings the redemption, the fulfillment of that. And I think this is where, no, I don't have it there. It helps us understand what redemption is and who's involved. Just give away stuff. Look at God's involvement just in the book of Exodus and look at man's involvement. The tabernacle, all the directions, there are nothing. I don't care. I read a lot where even with the 10 Commandments, they want to compare it to the Code of Hammurabi. This is what I do. The Code of Hammurabi is there because Noah brought all that stuff with him. They're copying what came with Noah. And the Code of Hammurabi is there because of the things that God did and that Noah talked about and everything. They didn't copy anything from Hammurabi. They copied everything that Noah brought with them. And the tabernacle, I'm sorry, that's God's. It's not a copy of anything that man did. It's made very important. In fact, the temple was too. It was his. It's not man's. You have the pagans do sacrifices. Well, who did the first sacrifice on this side? Noah did. They got all this stuff from Noah. And he brought it with him. And so we need to understand that. And so it gives us a good understanding of what's going on and everything. We need to understand the Exodus in the Bible. The Pentateuch taught Israel how to live as the redeemed people of Yahweh. This is where, when we think about the laws, and I put, or the instructions in the Pentateuch, Exodus 20, and then going into the Book of the Covenant that's in the next couple of chapters and everything. We think it's a legalistic code that stands in contrast to grace. But that's not, however, it is. It's not the case. It's not a legalistic code or anything. We see that the demands of the law arrived in a context of grace. What I mean by that is that God said, I brought you out of the land, out of the house of slavery. There's the grace. He brought them out. And that these laws are, I put it down at the bottom. It's how the redeemed are supposed to live. That's what the whole 10 Commandments and then the covenant laws they go after. That's his instructions telling them how to live as a redeemed. That crossing over of the sea of the Red Sea was the redemption. Now they're getting to the mountain, and this is how, as a redeemed people, how do I live? And we need to take a close look at that as believers. It's the same thing. I'm redeemed. How do I live? That's why James says, be doers of the word. It's not a legalistic code. I really believe that we've done harm to ourselves over the years of, making it look like a law, and it's 35 miles an hour, you go over that and you break. It's not that type of law, and it's how I'm supposed to live. And God said, again, I'm repeating all this stuff, and this is all that's in the Pentateuch. He says, if you do this, I'll take care of you. I kind of repeated it, kind of changed it. Now that you are Yahweh's redeemed people, this is how you must live. That's what it's all about. That's what that mountain experience is and everything, and it's phenomenal. There again, you take what the Ten Commandment movie did and everything, it turns it into a drama, and just you lose the importance of it. I don't know if I can read about it and try to see what God did there, but it's His presence. And think about that when you get to Exodus chapter 40. Pentateuch details many gracious provisions for the redeemed people. The story of the tabernacle and instructions to the priesthood, and later get that later part of Exodus, and then you get the sacrificial system, you get into Leviticus and everything. There are precious provisions that God gave to them people, and it's true that these symbols are not used today. Christ is the fulfillment of it. And I'm going to just forewarn you now. I am not going to do anything with the tabernacle or anything and say, this is Jesus, this is Jesus, this is Jesus, this is Jesus. He's the fulfillment of it. I don't need to take. The lamp is very interesting. All the other stuff is very interesting and everything, but I'm not going to, the idea of what it represents is what we need to see and everything, and what the Bible tells us about it. Is it going to be boring to read through? My comment is, when you get to read about the list that's given to Moses of how it's done, think about the order it's in. And then when you get to the construction, which comes later, think about the order it's in. It's not the same. There's a difference there, but the first one is very key important. If you think, is it boring? It's not boring. Tedious, yes. It's just like those genealogies. I think the genealogies are tedious because I cannot pronounce any of their names or anything, but there's a reason it's there. And that order of that tabernacle is very important to look at it, because in the overall picture, it's telling us something, and I hope you start thinking about, just when we talk about the tabernacle, I'll mention temple and everything like that, but it's the tabernacle. We need to understand the first teachings about the Pentateuch is the key lens in which we understand the rest of the Old Testament. And at the very end, which I'll get to, it's just very important. But what Deuteronomy is the last book of the Pentateuch. You get in there, you're going to read chapters 28 and 30. You're going to get the blessings, and you're going to get the curses. And when you get with Joshua, when you start reading Joshua, to see when they cross over the Jordan, then they act out the blessings and the curses. It's very important, because you just read that stuff. Just read Deuteronomy, and you got the rest of the Old Testament. I mean, it's just like reading about Solomon and what he had and what he did, and then just the rapid downfall. And there it goes with the multiple wives. It's just a speedy, they were at a height. Again, we don't understand, because because of the hatred of Israel, we don't get that except from what the Bible tells us. It was a golden age. It was a nation that was operating for a certain part of time the way it was supposed to be. And then it just took a rapid, and then there's where it tells me what you and I are like. It's just a rapid. But you get it all in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and 30. It just tells you about the blessings of the covenant and the coming possessions, the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey telling you, it's gonna be a great place that you're going. Again, if you look at some of the pictures of Israel today, sometimes you ask the question, well, I live here. But the curses and the breaking of it, it explains everything. Why all of a sudden, which I thought was very interesting with David, even with Saul, but when you get David, you start getting Judah, Israel, Judah, Israel, Judah, Israel. And that division just kind of pops up there. Now, if you read Genesis and talk about the brothers, you might understand where the divisions come from and all the infighting and just the way, but it gets worse as you go through. Finally, it's a restoration is there. At the end of Deuteronomy and everything, you get this idea that there's going to be a restoration. God is coming back. God is going to keep these people, and that gives you to the Old Testament. Finally, the Pentateuch points us to Christ in the gospel, and this is really, it's true. It records the first act of the redemption, and they find their ultimate fulfillment in Jesus. Jesus is a prophet greater than Moses. Again, I'll just say this. Pharaoh says, throw them in the Nile, kill the male babies. Yep. Herod says, kill the male babies. I mean, there's so many things that just resound there. He's the word through whom the world was created. He is the creator. His seed of the woman that crushed the serpent, it takes us back. Genesis 3:15 is very nebulous, but it had some understanding that even Eve had an understanding. And we know more because we have God's word complete. His death and resurrection completed. That's why at Luke 9:30-31, it's in verse 31 says, Moses and Elijah talked about his departure. You know, I thought it was interesting. Some believe that because they couldn't find where he was buried, that he almost was like Elijah taken up into heaven. I don't know. It says he died, but he was the leader of the Exodus. Elijah was taken out without dying. And it says they're talking about departure. The Greek is, they talked about the Exodus. And I die, I get a true Exodus. And so that's through Christ and everything. And probably this is where I'll put this in a very big thing. He's the great high priest. It's in Leviticus. You'll finally see where Aaron is now the high priest and everything. And something he does at one point is that he blesses the people. And then you have when Christ is being taken up into the heavens, he blesses the disciples and the people that are there, and then he goes up. I mean, it demonstrated he's a high priest, but he's also the king and everything. So he offered the ultimate sacrifice. We'll talk about the Passover, and we know those are pictures of Christ. That lamb without a spot or anything. It definitely is showing what Christ was and everything. The Pentateuch is the first act of the greatest story ever told. Is there a movie called The Greatest Story Ever Told? I've never seen that one. It's probably garbage too, but I don't know. But I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak my mind.
Not if you haven't watched it.
My wife will tell me later. Yeah. All I have to do is find a movie, let my 3 boys watch it, and the 3 critics will do what an amazing job of either praising it up or tearing it down, even down to one particular scene. The lighting was not correct and everything. So I'm not that way. But it's just the climax in our Lord Jesus. This last part I'm going to do is just the connecting, the way the chords take you back to the Pentateuch and everything. This is the way the Hebrew Bible is laid out. The first 5 books is called the Law of the Prophets. Start with Joshua, go all the way through, and they end with Malachi. This is how the Hebrew Bible is. And then you have the writings, and it starts off with Psalms and ends with Chronicles. Chronicles is the last in the Hebrew Bible. It's a completely different setup we have. I think if you read it that way, it's a literary layout. It tells a story a different way. Nothing different. We have it here. Ours is laid out chronological. I think they both have a value that should look at. Chronicles ends up with Cyrus's decree. Ours ends up with coming of someone new and everything, but this is how I put this out. The prophets, which is this line here, begins with Joshua is told to obey Moses' commandments, and then this book of the law shall not depart from their mouth, meditate on it day and night. At the end of it, in Malachi, it says, remember the law of Moses, my servant, even the statutes and judgments, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. And then in the beginning of the writings, you have in Psalm 1, but his delights in the law of Yahweh. In his law, he meditates day and night. The interconnecting, that's part of what this book I'm reading, is just the interweaving of all the stuff that goes back to the first 5 books, but it's all interconnected. But they're written by different people. Malachi was written by someone different, and a much longer time period. Psalms is written by someone different, but yet they all interconnect. That, to me, shows God's hand. It's just that God is involved. It is His word. It's not a man-made book. And again, that's what these academic people, it's a book written by man. There's no way that man could do that. It's just impossible. Yes, when we come back after the 20th, that Sunday, I will actually get into the book of Exodus. And I put this up here where Abraham knew. He was told, it says, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also that nation will they serve, I will judge, and they'll come out with great possessions. I mean, we all know what, the Exodus, and again, it's just like, why did they give all that stuff to them? And then what did they use it for? Build a tabernacle. I mean, it's just, I don't understand it, but that's, again, the hand of God and His promises that He makes. Quote from Eugene Merrill is, the purpose of the book of Exodus is to celebrate God's gracious deliverance of His chosen people, Israel, from Egypt, Egyptian slavery, to the freedom of covenant relationship and fellowship with Him. Which means my exodus from coming out of a sin nature and having a new nature then means that I have a covenant relationship with God, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and I need to live that way. Daniel Hayes, this is someone, author, I've read some stuff. The deliverance of Israel out of Egypt by Yahweh in the Old Testament is parallel in importance to the resurrection of Christ in the New Testament. The historicity of these events is critical foundation for proper understanding the rest of the Bible. It's so important. The Old Testament and just even these first 5 books are so important to grasp and understand. And I'll speak my mind again. It's so much more important than any football score, any basketball team, any highlight game, any polo, I'm trying to pick all the handball, racquetball. It's so important, but I get distracted. And why? He's the creator of the universe. It just fascinates me, and that's it. I didn't go too far over. No guarantees after this point. Once we get into some of the stuff, I will admit I have a problem because I'm already in chapter 40 and I'm trying not to jump into different things. But I hope you. Again, it's God's word, so it's important. Are there things that you have questions about? Well, I'm going to tell you, I have tons of questions. I'm gonna present some of them and see what we talk about, because there's some things I just like, I don't understand that. It just, again, but Moses is real. He is real, because our God is the God of the living, not the dead. And that's why he's there. He met with Christ. I don't think there's my other comment I made. Even in this Christian that does this movie, I don't think Moses looked the way that they portray him. Back at 120, he probably looked way better than I did. And it says, it's just like, the long hair, I just don't know. I'm not real sure about that. I can't grow long hair anymore, but I just think we've had some perceptions. We got to be careful. We're going to do it, and I'm going to make speculations about different things and everything. No, they didn't have ballpoint pens, but they were able to write. And I do believe that they had more, the stuff that were put in stone, the idea was permanence, and it's for the next generation. There was tons of stuff that was written on. I think they were intelligent people. I think that Noah brought with him, they knew how to make some paper some way. And I keep going back on the writing. There was absolutely no way. I looked it up and I can't remember, so to tell you, you can look it up. There was something like 5 or 7 ancient libraries. Well, why do you have a library if people are illiterate and they don't write? The part that is bad is that we're so evil that when we go and conquer people, we go down and burn their libraries. And so, we've lost a lot of stuff.